Ho, ho, ho. Christmas is on its way then? I can't wait. I bloody hate Christmas. Way too much expense just for one day. It will be nice to see the family though. That is, of course, if the planet makes it to Christmas. Anyway, apologies for not doing a video for a couple of weeks, but I had some rather concerning news that threw my motivation out the window. The type of news that makes you realise just how precious existence in this reality really is. So, what's been happening? Well, Cameron will get his second vote on bombing Syria this Wednesday, as I said he would do, that is, have a second vote on bombing Syria, just after he lost the first vote, back in 2013. You can read Cameron and the establishment like a book, and not a very good book. Have you noticed that on all the big decisions, politicians tend to always get what they want eventually, don't they? Remember when Ireland had the audacity to reject the EU and the Lisbon Treaty? What did the establishment do? They poured millions into the media in Ireland to spew even more propaganda, then had another vote in a year or so. Then repeat the above until you get the result you want. And once you have the result you want, never hold a vote again. That's how it works. Remember the vote to bomb Syria in 2013 was to bomb Assad, after the government and the corporate-sponsored media told us that Assad had fired chemical weapons, which crossed Obama's red line. Well, despite the fact that the UN ascertained that it was in fact the rebels that fired the chemical weapons and not Assad in it, we were all still pounded by the corporate media lies and government lies, constantly telling us that we have to bomb Assad to make us safe because Assad fired chemical weapons. You see, it doesn't matter if the facts state the opposite of what the corporate media and the corporate governments are telling us, as long as they stick to the same story. As long as they stick to that story and do not deviate from it, they project the perception that Assad fired chemical weapons and that we must have a military response, regardless of the fact that he did no such thing. It's the perception, it's how the general public perceive the situation that matters to the establishment, because they know people don't do detail anymore. You're deemed somehow weird if you actually take the time to break something down and look into the intricate workings of something. Subconsciously, your mind accepts the perception that is thrown your way by the mainstream, bought and paid for media and governments, which allows you to go and watch I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, safe in the knowledge that you have a perception of what is going on in the world, whether that's right or wrong. And it's normally wrong, because it's coming from the government. Now, following the attacks in Paris last month, we are being told we need to bomb ISIS in Syria and not Assad in Syria, like Cameron wanted to do in 2013, because we're told that ISIS are now a threat to us on the streets in the UK. According to Andrew Parker, Fatty Four Eyes, Director General of MI5, they've stopped 6 terror attacks in the last 12 months at home and 7 terror attacks abroad. But according to David Cameron, MI5 have stopped 7 attacks at home in the last 6 months. I'm not sure who's right, but it doesn't matter, because they will not release any details of any of the plots due to national security. So they can do and say what they like, as their terror plot figures not matching up proves. Michael Fallon, our Secretary of Defence, is an incredibly sharp, incredibly bright, incredibly intelligent man, and we are so lucky to have his odd-shaped head in our government, or so we're told. With an absolute straight face, he suggested the other day on corporate news that he wants Assad to join forces with the Free Syrian Army and fight ISIS. Just a couple of things, Mr. Fallon. 1. Do you really think that after 5 years of the Free Syrian Army and Assad fighting each other, resulting in hundreds of thousands of people being killed, Do you really think they're just gonna come together, shake hands, let bygones be bygones, and fight ISIS together? Because you said they should. To even suggest such a thing shows us Mr. Fallon hasn't got a bloody clue about Syria, which is very worrying indeed, because he's a massive advocate for more bombing, and he's also the Secretary of Defence. Surely he should know something. Honestly, where do they drag these politicians up from? How the hell do they get elected? Secondly, Mr. Fallon, is the fact that the Free Syrian Army are made up mainly of Al-Qaeda, the very same Al-Qaeda that we supported in Libya, whilst the corporate media and corporate governments told us that Al-Qaeda were the enemy, even as we were fighting alongside them in Libya. And this is the same Al-Qaeda, dare we forget, that the corporate media and corporate governments tell us attacked London on 7/7 and attacked America on 9/11. There are now 12 countries bombing Syria. 12 countries, all taking their turn to murder civilians whilst trying to kill ISIS jihadis that are armed to the teeth with American weapons and have pockets stuffed full of cash from Turkey, who have bought over $800 million worth of stolen oil from them. So what's the best thing the UK government can do to improve the situation in Syria with 12 countries already bombing there? What can the UK government do to look like a world player, a decent, peace-loving nation, hell-bent on stopping the civil war in Syria and routing out the ISIS jihadis to bring about peace? Heck, we're told we have a fantastic, well-educated, informed, intelligent government. Some of the best minds in the country are within our government, apparently. So what are we going to do to make a difference? Well, without showing a shred of common sense, without displaying any remorse for the civilians in Syria, without even considering the ramifications of our actions, we are going to, wait for it, we're going to become the 13th country to bomb Syria, whilst being cheered on by psychopaths like Dan Hodges of the Telegraph, who also wants an Orwellian police state to keep us safe. The quicker robots take over his column at the Telegraph, the better. Unbelievable. Think about it. Becoming the 13th country to bomb Syria to get ISIS is just ridiculous, when at least 450 jihadis have returned to the UK from Syria and are now running around the UK unopposed. What is the point in bombing ISIS targets in Syria? The terrorists are already in our country, and this is without adding any new terrorists that have made it to our shores via the refugee crisis. Surely we aren't going to bomb Syria just to spend the 12 billion extra money Cameron is giving his friends in the arms companies, are we? 12 billion, whilst we can't house or feed our own people. Staggering. Why do we put up with this? Sensible people would suggest that we don't bomb ISIS in Syria with 12 other countries doing exactly that. Leave Syria to them. Sensible people would suggest we spend the money it would cost bombing Syria on our own people and also rooting out the jihadis who have returned from Syria to our own country before we start a bombing campaign on a country that has done absolutely nothing to us. MI5 know where these jihadis are. Their names and addresses will be on their MI5 job applications. These 450 potential MI5 recruits, stroke jihadis, left the country, went to Syria, returned to the UK with a passport. We will have records of their visit. We will have their details. All we need to locate them. Find them. Don't bomb civilians in Syria. To think that a Prime Minister actually believes that by bombing apparent ISIS targets in Syria, it will stop an attack in Britain is ridiculous. It's childish and it is incredibly naive. Bombing apparent ISIS targets in Syria will do nothing but bring forward an attack by ISIS on the UK. Think about it this way. If you were in a gang and you had 12 other gangs fighting you, would you spend your time planning attacks on a gang that weren't fighting you? No, of course you wouldn't. You'd concentrate on getting back at the 12 gangs that were already attacking you. When we vote to join the other 12 gangs fighting the one gang, we will then become a target, as the other 12 gangs already are, as Paris proves. By voting to bomb ISIS in Syria, David Cameron will have blood of the innocent British people on his hands when an attack happens by ISIS. But he won't care. It will give him the perfect opportunity to pass the Snoopers Charter, to have the military on the streets, to militarise the police, to clamp down on dissidents, to basically do anything he likes. Cameron could quite easily turn the UK into a Nazi police state. Our papers, please? Anything is on the table once there is an attack by ISIS in the UK, and all this bombing is going to do is speed that up and bring it forward. Just watch what happens and you will see that I am right. Do you remember, for years we were told that the terrorists hate us because we are free? Well, they should start liking us now, because with every passing day we're becoming less and less free. Just what Dan Hodges of the Telegraph wants. That Orwellian police state with a boot stamping on our faces forever. We have no entry plan in Syria. We have no exit plan in Syria. We have no rebuilding plan in Syria. We have no government proposals in Syria. Syria will become even more of a nightmare when we go in and add to the other 12 countries that are already bombing. And if by the grace of God we manage to defeat the huge odds and we beat ISIS by bombing alone, what takes its place? Whatever it will no doubt be backed by America to cause more untold mayhem. And all this is happening without serious talk of ground troops that will definitely happen in the future. Have you noticed that the idea of ground troops is now slowly being introduced, even before we're bombing in Syria? Let's start a Syrian ground troop petition to send David Cameron's kids over there first, then to send the children of every MP that voted to bomb ISIS in Syria. Don't get me wrong, ISIS need to be destroyed, but going about it the way Cameron wants to is completely wrong and pointless, frankly. He is now putting the lives of every man, woman and child in the UK in danger with his Bomb Syria policy, because Cameron is now making us all targets because of his vote. When ISIS starts shooting and killing innocent people in the UK, by the way, never a politician or a banker, never a government building that gets shot up, is it? Anyway, but when they start killing innocent people and setting off suicide bombs, and when we find out that it was jihadis that were already in the country, just remember, our government took a willful decision to ignore that threat. They ignored the jihadis that have been to Syria and have come back in favour of bombing Syria miles away, which will have only hastened the attack on the UK. But we all know that Cameron's main aim in Syria is to get Assad, who's being protected by Russia. This is the real reason Cameron wants to join the bombing in Syria. Otherwise, the sensible action is to close our borders, find the jihadis that are already in the country, and lobby for America to stop arming them, and other countries such as Turkey, Qatar, Saudi Arabia to stop funding them. The only realistic chance we have of stopping ISIS is to stop supporting them. Obama, are you listening? I wonder if the UK Air Force will shoot down a Russian jet over Syria, like Turkey did, because apparently the Russian jet spent 17 seconds in Turkey's airspace. Seems a little trigger-happy, doesn't it? Especially when you consider that Turkey have violated the Greek airspace over 1,500 times in the last year alone. Instead of dropping more bombs on Syria to get ISIS, here is Slipknot's 6-point plan that our government must introduce to stop ISIS dead in their tracks. Our government should, number 1, close our borders. Number 2, spend the $12 billion that is to be put towards Cameron's arms company executive friends, spend it on housing, feeding our own people, and give some to MI5 to use to be able to root out and lock up the jihadis that have already travelled to Syria and returned until they're not a threat anymore. Do that rather than MI5 offering them all jobs. 3. Call Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Qatar, and other countries who are apparently our friends. Call them out for funding ISIS and other terrorist organisations. Cameron should also openly call out Barack Hussein Obama, the weakest president in American history, for creating, arming, funding ISIS, and demand that he stops it now. Number 5. Our government should create a coalition to follow the money and oil sales to ensure the weapons and funding to ISIS is completely cut off. And number 6. Our government should sack Michael Fallon as Defence Secretary for just looking so odd. Removing the support and defunding ISIS is the only way to stop them. I think we're going to start having to have some grown-up conversations over the next few months, don't you?